This webinar is to commemorate Children's Mental Health Week, put together by the charity Place to Be. And it's something we do every year, not only to celebrate children and young people who are at the heart of what we do at AfriKindness, but to, I guess, reflect on how best we can support them through the journey of being a young person. And for this year, the theme is This is My Place, helping young people to feel they belong. And so the conversations we'll be having today with the experts, the parents, and all of you in the room is really get towards just reflecting on what it takes to create that sense of belonging for young people wherever we find them, whether it's at home, in school, in places of worship, or any other public spaces. And I'm very delighted to have a distinguished panel to discuss this very important issue with us. We have Annabelle, we also have Terence, and we have Adi. And each of them comes with a wealth of experience, both in their professional lives, but also in their personal lives as well. And so without further ado, I'll invite you, Annabelle, to introduce yourself. Tell us what you do.
Hi, yes, good evening, everybody. Yes, so I'm Annabelle, and I've just been the newly appointed Education Trustee for AfriKindness, so I'm absolutely delighted to join the team. So my professional background, I've been a senior leader in schools for a long time, and have particularly led on student wellbeing and safeguarding and behaviour and attitudes to learning. So this is something that's really, really important to me. And then personally, I'm also a parent of two children, a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old, so at different stages, but again, this is such an important conversation to have, and being a parent as well as an educator.
Thank you so much. Terence?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thanks, Petty. Terence, I'm the mental health lead with AfriKindness, but professionally, I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist working around the region. And of course, I, in my personal life, one of the youth leaders at my local church. I've been doing work with young people and children since I was a teenager myself. So this is a long time, not to give my age away. It's a long time I've been doing this kind of work, both from a volunteer perspective and now more professionally. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terence. Adi?
I'm Edwina Smith. I am presently an advocate for virtual schools for looked after children. So every local authority has one. We support social workers to ensure that children are in school, and we support their mental health and trauma informed practice. My background in education is in education and psychology, and prior to this role, I was an assistant educational psychologist, and I am the newly appointed parent empowerment lead at AfriKindness, and I am very excited to get started and support everyone going forward.
Thank you so much, Adi. And I should say, my name is Pedi Obani, and I support AfriKindness as well as a parent team lead. And I'm going to be the host for today's webinar. Really delighted to have you all here with us. So let's get cracking. Now, the first set of questions I'd like us to reflect on is about understanding what we mean by belonging. And I would like to encourage everyone in the audience, feel free to share your questions. If you've got any as we go along, you can use the Q&A function so that we can put those questions forward to our panelists as well. And so without further ado, I'll ask directly, when we say belonging, what is the importance of belonging in the journey of a young child or a teenager or an adolescent? Why is that an important conversation to be having in the first place? I see Annabelle smiling. Go for it.
I think it's everything really, and particularly for the young person and the child as they're navigating this journey from childhood to teenage and adolescence. It's about the message that you're safe and that you're important in our family, and that you're supported, and we will handle this together. And that can be, I think, created, that sense of belonging, through not necessarily big gestures, but everyday routines, everyday rituals, that give that message to the child that they are safe and they're valued in their family. I think that would be the first thing that I would say.
Thank you so much for that, Annabelle. I think you've highlighted the importance of belonging, especially from the perspective of a family, because for most children, that would be their first experience of that sense of belonging or not. So thanks for pointing that out. Terence, do you want to say anything about that?
I guess the thing I'd probably add is, from a developmental perspective, having a sense of belonging for a child helps with their cognitive development. It helps with their emotional development and attunement, particularly to their caregivers. So that allows them to, when I say attunement, that's how well they're able to bond and feel like they get their caregivers and their caregivers get them. So whether that's mom or dad, that's an aunt, whoever the caregiver is, thinking about the different contexts of the different children, that maybe in various kind of blended families as well, or even in the foster care system or looked after children. And it's a very helpful bit to be able to have that bit of attunement and feeling like one belong, like Annabella said about safety, that actually they can be themselves in that environment is very important. So cognitively, it helps with their development. From an emotional perspective, it helps with their development. And as well, when we think about from a mental health perspective, then if a child is safe or feel like they belong, they have more confidence, their self-esteem would be more boosted, and that therefore means they're able to have a better sense of self. And with them having a better sense of self, that allows them to then engage in the world in a way that leads to a holistic, I guess, helpful impact on their mental health. So it's not just the absence of poor health, but they're able to navigate the world in a way that offers them more of a how do I say it? Navigate the world in a way that offers them the opportunity to be more productive, whether it's in school, whether it's in friendship groups, or even within the family unit itself. So I think belonging, it's such a vital aspect to child development at the earlier bit. And of course, as a child grows and gets older into an adolescent and they transition to that point in life, it also plays an important role there. So it's something that I'm glad we're talking about it, but it's something that we really need to think a little bit more about.
No, thank you so much for that. And the way you've put it, Annabelle and Terence, you've really highlighted the fact that belonging is not only an issue of mental health, but it's something that also spans into the social aspects of a child's development, and perhaps even the economic aspect, if I can go as far as that, because in a sense, that belonging stays with them and grows with them, as they get older and get into other aspects of life, whether it's school, it's work, and things like that. And so I'll ask you, Adi, what do you think, beyond the importance of belonging, you've done lots of work with young children as well. So in your own experience, what does belonging look like from the perspective of a child or a young person?
I think from early years, the perspective of a very young child would just be consistency, routines. For very little children, what your facial expressions, the tone of your voice. It's very easy when they're very small because they're very cute. But we still need to keep that same idea with older children as well, how you speak to them and being there for them. Mostly just listening sometimes, especially as they get older. Listening to what they have to say without judgment, and letting them know that home at the very least is a safe space. As Terence said, it is foundational to their belonging all the way through until their early 20s. So it helps ensure that they have those connections with adults and they know how to repair and reflect and be compassionate in the future.
And what about from a school's perspective? Should we be speaking about belonging in school as well?
Every school has an ethos. It should be inclusive. There are statutory practices, meaning the SEN Code of Practice, the Child and Family Act, everything says that the child's view and the child's understanding is important. So even when teachers are educating, when they go to explain to a young person what mistake they've made, they have to get feedback from that child so that they know that the child understands that mistakes happen and it's okay. Schools should be building an ethos of inclusion and belonging from, I like to say, from the top down, because if the senior leadership believe it and instill those inclusive practices, then the rest of the school will follow all the way to teachers, teaching assistants, and everyone in the classroom. But as parents, belonging is actually quite helpful at home because it can reduce those kind of those feelings you take home when you have those microaggressions or racial instances in schools. Knowing that you have a place where you belong at home, sometimes, unfortunately, they may experience that in school. Sometimes not even sometimes, unfortunately, the curriculum isn't always built for every family or every background. And so sometimes they need to come home to have that space to vent and say, I've learned this in education today. And they need to have that safe space to say, what does that look like for me? And where do I fit in? Because I don't see myself in the curriculum. So as parents, we need to be having those conversations about what it looks like for us, for our cultures and our backgrounds as well.
No, thank you. I think those are very important points you've raised, especially the role of parents in all of this. And so it's one thing for the child to feel that sense of belonging or not outside of the home, but then the parents become that stable influence to then ensure that when the children come back into the home, we have those conversations and try and understand from their perspective what's gone on outside. And of course, make sure that that home is a safe space for them to feel like they truly belong. And I think that leads to the next question, because I'm sure for most parents, that understanding the importance of belonging, it will be a priority, right? It will be a priority to make sure that your child or a child in your care feels that sense of belonging. And so the question is, for parents who are wondering, how can they recognize when a child feels they belong and if they feel like they're out of place somewhere? Terence?
I guess it's going back to what Annabelle said before about those daily simple little things, and as what Edwin has mentioned as well around those routines. Obviously, a baby may not be able to communicate verbally with words to say, "Hey, I like this" or "I don't like that," but they respond to positive smiles. They respond better to a tone of voice that shows that communicates warmth and communicates love. So even from a baby's perspective, are those positive bits of when we think of a bonding, is the child being able to feel like they can smile back and that feels safe enough? Or when we get to toddler or even an older child, what is the home environment actually like? Is there a lot of shouting? Are they safe to say, share their own opinions, share their views, and feel like those views would be respected? So parents can then think about it from the perspective of what's the quality of the relationship that they actually have with their children, and that's a good way to kind of gauge how the child feels like they belong. So are we able to have those conversations? Banter is good, we can bant, of course, but it's that done in a way that actually uplifts that child. And similarly, can the child feel safe enough to say, hey, I'm struggling with this, like Edwin's mentioned, school's difficult. Can I say to mom and dad or an adult in the home or even other siblings, hey, I'm actually having a difficult time at school? Or is that also a difficult thing where they don't feel that they belong at home, so they can't even share the difficulties? So it's where I would say parents are able to have a helpful relationship with the child, but also where the child feels confident and safe enough to not only share the positives, which we all like to do, but also when things are not going so well. And I think that's a good marker of actually this child or this young person feels like they belong, and parents can take that as a good example as well of actually we're onto something here where we're connecting with each other in that regard.
Well, thank you very much, Terence. And if I can ask both Annabelle and Addie, because Terence has really delved into this home setting and the kinds of things that make children feel that sense of belonging. So going from the routines, but also the reassurance when things don't go the way we want them to go, whether it's with exams or it's with anything else, or even just behavioral challenges. How would this play out in schools? So for educators who are here with us, what should they be looking out for?
I think I can sort of lead on that. I think it was a little bit like Edwina was saying earlier about schools actually creating a very visible, welcome and inclusive environment within the school, and actually being able to look at the curriculum and look at the resources, and are the children who they are teaching, are they represented in the classrooms, you know, in the toys that they use, in the books that are the resources that are being shared. I think that's sort of really important. And actually a lot of the time when you think about belonging and you think of schools, it's actually having key people within the school, you know, that person, that key person within the school, be that a wellbeing lead or a pastoral manager or a form tutor for older children, or the class teacher, or maybe a teaching assistant. It's about having that person that's looking out for that child and being able to have that key person that you connect with, because it might be that you don't connect with everybody, but there should be one person who is an advocate, a champion for that child, that creates a space that they feel that they're belonging. And I think when a child feels that they're not belonging in a place, you'll often see them actually visibly disengage with the curriculum. It could come out in their behaviours. They're not wanting to talk, they're not wanting to play. So actually having somebody, having that champion within the school, can identify if that child is feeling like they don't belong and they are beginning to sort of move away and withdraw from the school situation. So I think key people is really important, but then on a wider thing, actually having that really visible welcome. How do the children get welcomed when they go into the school at the beginning of the day, and how does that end, and what communication is there? Is there two-way communication from the school to the parents and vice versa? I think.
Thank you so much for that, Annabelle. Addie?
I think like Annabelle said about having representation and being able to see themselves. So in very, again, early years, that would be books, images. In older schools, you can tell the sense of belonging and inclusion normally just by looking around. This is something I do. So I'll look for flags, I'll look for signs of bilingualism, heritage, differences that the school is celebrating. There's normally some sort of a poster or a lesson plan that the school tries to keep visible. And every school will normally have their motto at the front of the building or in the office somewhere where you can see it. And it should have something in it about belonging and about inclusion. Another thing as well is when your child has additional needs, belonging isn't just about them attending school, it's about the school making adjustments so that that child can participate like other children. And that doesn't mean just education, it means having friends, because a big part of belonging is having a sense of community. So going to school and knowing who your friends are and who your people are away from your family. So send students as well need to have, as Annabelle said, those key adults available in school to help them and to provide that kind of additional access to make sure that students are able to fit in and that they're not struggling, and to make sure that they have a way to communicate in school as well. Not every child is able to access a key adult, but they should have someone, as Annabelle said, someone safe that they trust in school, that they can go to. I've had students where they didn't feel comfortable with the adult, but they had a good friend who could speak up for them. So again, that's a sense of belonging and a sense of I know who I can go to when I have this struggle or I have this issue.
Well, thank you very much. And I think you've covered a broad range of issues here, from what to do at home to make it a more welcoming space for children and young people to what to look out for in schools as well. And so you've mentioned the curriculum, you've mentioned visible displays of the mottos of the school and things like that. But you've also mentioned, I think, things that parents need to be looking out for. And so perhaps as parents, beyond looking at the academic records of a school, these are also very important aspects of the school's culture that parents should be aware of and should be looking out for and actually asking questions about when we go for the school visits or Parents' Day and things like that. So thank you very much for highlighting these very important aspects of belonging and what we could do as parents to, I guess, just get the system to be more responsive to the children's and young people's needs in this regard. And I think that takes us really nicely to the next bit of the conversation, which is around home as my place, because ultimately that's what we want, isn't it? Where children can confidently say, this is my place, I belong here. So home as my place, schools as my place, and indeed wider systems, whether they're faith organizations or cultural organizations or other places where young people spend a considerable amount of time. And so the first question is, if we start with the home, some of these you've mentioned in the beginning when you've talked about the kinds of things we could do, and you've mentioned rituals, for instance, that make children feel safe at home. What are some additional small but common practical everyday actions that parents and adults can sort of indulge in to help children feel safe but also valued? And how can families altogether create a sense of belonging during stressful and uncertain times? Because of course it's easy to do when everything is rosy, things are good, but we do know that sometimes just being an adult, being in a home setting, there are all sorts of pressures that adults could be faced with, but we don't want this being transferred to children. And very often it's in those stressful moments that parents kind of slip up and children bear the brunt of it. So how can we as parents maintain the practice? What are the ways in which we can keep up, that conducive environment and a strong sense of belonging for our children and children in our care, even during stressful and uncertain times? Who would like to go first?
Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah, I don't mind starting with that. I think when if we take the stressful times in a moment, I think it actually comes from, like we were talking about, those predictable, those family rituals, and they can be very simple and small things, like predictable routines, predictable bedtimes, and with little children that might be bath, cuddle, book, and there's with older children it's really important to have that time. Even I can talk personally with teenage son, it's important to still have that time for connection at the end of the day and actually reflect on the day that we've had. So those predictable routines are really important, and actually giving a voice and a space, letting the child's voice into the family dynamic again is really important. There was some research and they were asking some children, what would you say about belonging, and they talk about slow down and see me. If I could say one thing to my parent, I would say just slow down and see me, because parents, it's mad. We're rushing around, we're managing work, we're managing clubs and activities, and it's so easy to sometimes forget and go, oh, rush. And actually they said, slow down and see me. And what does that look like in practical terms? Invite their voices into the conversation. Have weekly rituals as families. Do you have a family meal night? Do you build into your family life, weave into your family life some occasions that you have rituals and statements like, in this family together we will work together and we're going to make it work, we're here for everybody has a voice. And those actual really simple and easy things that we can create when we have 10 minutes distraction free time just to talk to one another and maybe read a book or talk about our day, what's happened, what's gone well today, and what's not been so good. They are really important things that when there are then stressful times, they're almost protective behaviours around that family. And I think when there is stressful time, it's actually listening without judgment. I think we've talked about that already this evening. And also not to instantly go and try and fix the situation. As a parent, you want to immediately fix if something's bad's happened, but it's actually also listening to that emotion and labeling that emotion. I can tell you're really frustrated. What can we do to work this out? So actually allowing them to be agents in the change and actually being really proactive members in changing the situation, but not immediately trying to fix it, but actually acknowledging that that is a feeling and that is a very valid emotion. And you know, we can deal with this together. I think that constant sort of message, I think would help, especially when things are really stressful.
Well, thank you so much for that, Annabelle. Addie, would you like to add to that?
I think just to add really to what Annabelle said, it's mostly the same, but in early years, it's very simple. It's, am I safe? Am I happy? For children in primary, I would say their sense of belonging at home is, do I matter? When you go home, your mom and dad make you seem like you're the best thing in the entire world to ever happen. And when they're a bit older and adolescents, I would say it's about making them feel accepted for who they are. As Annabelle said, having that safe space to come home and say it's okay to be you. Of course, there will be some healthy boundaries in there, but it's okay to be yourself. And then to support them as parents to become themselves, to become the young adults that we know they're going to be. But as Annabelle said, to take that step back, which is really difficult. I have an 18-year-old. I think it's the hardest thing ever in parenting that they don't warn you about, is to watch things happen and take the step back and know you can come to me if you need me. And in the end, they will do. They come and they let you know, but it's given them that space to stand up and be themselves, and to just let them. I know we said no judgment, but to keep in mind our own judgments, if that makes sense. So we were all raised a certain way. We all have our own ideas of how things are supposed to be. For those of us that are not typically from the UK, sometimes things are different. It's about respecting that our children are autonomous to us. They have their own lives, their own experiences, and to let them have that space to grow and develop.
Wow. And I think, like you said, that's possibly the most difficult thing, isn't it? It's just
Yes.
letting them have that space to grow.
Yeah.
And in a sense, once they think or once they know that you trust them enough to have that space, it also just makes it better, isn't it? Because they feel that sense of, okay, my parent trusts me or my guardian trusts me. And that in itself boosts their confidence. But of course, before we can do that, we need to have equipped them, which is where all those things you've mentioned in terms of those rituals, just reinforcing the positive messages comes in really handy. Terence, what do you think? But also, how can parents, schools, faith communities, whichever you want to tackle, how can everyone work together to strengthen a child's sense of belonging? Because clearly, it's one thing to do it at home, but it needs to be reinforced at school and it needs to be reinforced wherever else the children may find themselves. So how can this partnership be forged between the different, I guess, big players in a child's life to make sure that we're strengthening the sense of belonging in the children and not tearing it apart?
I think it's thinking about how children don't and adolescents, they don't grow up in isolation or in a vacuum, and they grow up within systems around them. So we have the home, which is like the first, you want to call it, institution. Then we have school, and then for those of us who are faith-based, we have faith-based organizations. I can think about it from the perspective of faith-based organizations in that regard. I'm one of the youth leaders at my church, and the church plays, or faith-based organization plays, such a pivotal role in molding not just a moral compass of children and giving them something, a safe, the word of the day, I think, is going to come down to safety, but it's giving them another safe space where they can explore their own identities, whether from a faith perspective, or even if they have questions that maybe mom and dad may not be feeling equipped to answer, or they don't feel safe enough to have those discussions at school, faith-based organizations can provide that environment where we can not, because in some instances, sometimes people may view faith-based organizations to be opposing to family life, but we need to see how we can actually make them meld together in a way where actually the work that's done at home or the work that's done, say, at youth clubs, at a faith-based organization, at Sunday school, or whatever the activities, camps, etc., that it's all geared towards how do we help children, like Addie and Annabelle is saying, to become more autonomous, but feel confident while doing that. That actually their voice is respected, their views more specifically is respected and incorporated. So it's that bit about them feeling listened to. And that's where faith-based organizations play a very pivotal role, where there are mentors there that can say, hey, this is how you can navigate the challenges of life with a different perspective in a way that ultimately leads to that child development, in terms of sense of self, in terms of self-identity, in terms of purpose, because I think that's another big thing that faith-based organization helps children to develop, so that by the time they become adults, they're able to tackle the world. And the world can be scary, and I think that's one of the big things that parents are worried about, how scary the world is. It's helping them to feel confident enough that their children can go out into the world and not be consumed by it, but be able to navigate it in a way where actually they're able to thrive and not merely survive. And I think that's a helpful perspective, that faith-based organizations can help children and young people to be able to thrive.
Thank you so much for that. Annabelle, anything to add?
I think, with regards to sort of schools as well, I mean, the research shows that a strong homeschool community partnership improves well-being and mental health and engagement. It's out there. And I think when we're talking about schools and sort of working together to strengthen that sense of belonging, as a parent, when you're engaging with the school, it's really important to build bridges with those schools and those community groups. Attend school events, introduce yourself to the teachers and pastoral staff, share important cultural, family or faith or family context that helps the adults within the school understand your child better. And really important to reinforce that school and community values at home so that they feel connected. Talk positively about the school, maybe encourage your children to join clubs at the school, or the youth groups, and invite friends from the school and the youth groups into your home, because that kind of gives a message, I think, to your child that you belong at home, at school, and in our community. So that's really important for parents to engage with the schools in that way. I would say, being a school leader is really important.
Thank you so much. And the point you made about just inviting, whether it's the people from the youth club or from school into the home as well, because sometimes the difficulty is what people don't understand, they really can't engage with. And so if you're able to create that welcoming space for people to come in, whether into the home, into the environment, they just get to understand a bit more about the culture, especially for multicultural societies or for children from diverse backgrounds as well. So I think we can't overemphasize that, whether it's the food, whether it's the way of greeting, or even just the clothes people wear, so there's just something about being in a home space and having those conversations without the pressure of saying, well, I don't know what this is and I can't ask, and so I'll just walk away and make my own impressions or form my own impressions, whether they're well informed or not. Addie, I mean, you've got experience of working in schools and interacting with parents, and I'm just wondering, for parents who's new, for instance, the UK environment, how do they begin to navigate? Because for parents who are new to the UK, there's navigating your own sense of belonging as a parent, not to mention your child's sense of belonging. Yeah. Personally, for me, one of the things that I found really interesting was even just the communication book.
Yeah.
So child would come home with it. I didn't know what it was for. I thought it was just the book the teacher had in the bag for whatever reason. Never
Yeah.
engaged with it. And then first week, second week, I got a note saying, "Oh, your child should be reading at home 3 times a week." And I was like, "Yeah, she reads every day actually."
Yeah.
And say, "Well, we don't know that." And I'm saying, "How are you supposed to know?" And they say, "Oh, you should write it in the book." And I was like, "Well, no one told me." So that was me even trying to understand
Yeah.
my just navigate the space. So I
The
didn't
new
feel a sense of
system.
belonging because I didn't understand the system, right? So much less the child's. Essentially, the question is, how do we just navigate the process? Because as parents, we need to feel that sense of belonging to be able
Yeah.
to support the children to do that. And how do we do this working closely with schools?
So the first thing would be to have those conversations with the school. So firstly, in the UK, everything is evidence-based. They do want some form of evidence, not just for themselves, for Ofsted, which is why you'll get things like a communication book. It helps them to track, it helps them to communicate with you as well. But it's also just speak to your child's teacher. Speak if you want. Every school has an email address on their webpage. They're obligated to. They have the head of the school and the governor, the governor of the school will, the head teacher will answer to him. The governors are meant to challenge. So you can ask your head teachers or senior leaders, you can say, how do we record and respond to certain incidents? Is the data available or shared with the local authority? What training do staff do for racial biases? You can have these conversations. And if, for example, you've noticed that there's no appropriate anything in the curriculum or evidence, that evidences a different culture, or if you think your child's not going to belong in that school, you can address it and you can raise it with senior staff. As Annabelle said, there's always pastoral leads and the SENCO. The SENCO is a special educational lead coordinator, but chances are they're most likely the person you're going to speak to about inclusion and belonging as well. And you can ask about that and say, I want my child to feel belong. Who can I go to? And they should be able to point you in the right direction. If you're worried about some things, because we know historically that children from ethnic backgrounds are historically excluded more or face behavioral issues more. So those are things that you can address initially as soon as you get there. What are your practices for behavior? What does that look like? What are the thresholds? Every school has layers and levels. You can talk about that with your child at home and then discuss what it looks like from your cultural perspective to your child and then explain what this looks like in school and what the differences will be. You can ask your school about an inclusive curriculum. For example, we know in England that Black History Month is in October. You can ask your school, are you doing anything? And some schools will invite the parents and go, we don't know what we're doing. We would be happy to have you help. But if you're transparent and you go to the school saying, I'm looking for a partnership, can we do this together? Most of the times, the schools want the help. Teachers are overloaded, overworked, and they don't have enough of anything, time, resources. So most of the time, they would be very happy to take on any information that you have. You can also volunteer to be a school governor if you need it. Not you, if you're lucky, you'll get to do it at your own children's school. But across the country, there are actually lots of schools looking for governors to volunteer, if anyone's interested. But as a parent, addressing belonging in the education system requires you to be upfront and be a little bit bold and address those issues. Don't wait for it to come up or your child to be having behavior needs, because sometimes it's about a misunderstanding, because culturally sometimes we can be louder, we can be a little bit more celebratory, or that comes across as well even when we're angry. So sometimes schools don't always understand it, so you need to be having these conversations beforehand. Some schools have international days. Encourage your school to hold all these events. Ask them to make sure that there is systemic practice, that it isn't just something they're doing once in a while, that it's encouraged and built in. And it's one of those things that's going to take lots of emails, lots of work, lots of phone calls. But it is definitely worth it in the end, because my child, for example, her face when she walked in and she saw our flag hanging up in the school, but they'd done it for all of the children in the school from various countries. And that was parent led. It was parents going in and saying, what can we do to show that this school represents all of us? So that would be my encouragement for parents. Just put yourself out there, communicate, and don't stop communicating.
No, excellent. Thank you. I think for me, it ended up with having to address the assembly. And I must say it was a scary experience, but hey, I think it was worth it.
Primary
We've got
school
a
assembly is
question.
terrifying.
It
That
was.
sounds terrifying.
We've got a question here. Thank you very much for the question. Is communication book same as the student's diary? So in my case, it was a communication book, but based on your experience with schools and maybe the higher classes, key stage 3, 4, is the communication book the same as student diary? Does anyone know?
Yeah, probably. I would say the communication book, some schools call it a reading record, and it really tends to be a book that's sort of around primary school. Infant and primary schools will have that communication book, and that's often to record reading, because reading at home is so vital to a child's outcomes, but also that's an opportunity to write notes in or post-it notes, etc. A student diary will tend to be within a secondary school setting, because the emphasis more is on the child taking responsibility for their learning, so that'll be where they record their homework. Or again, you can write a note, because often there's a space for a parent signature. And I think also be aware of apps as well. A lot of schools now are moving very much more towards, digital platforms to communicate with parents and with children. So be aware of that and make sure that that's where those attendance to the meetings is really important, or reading the newsletters. I know we sort of get inundated with emails, but when there are school emails from the school, it's really important to just look at them, because they may well give you one-time information where it says you need to sign up to this platform, and this is how they then send everything out to you. So that, I think student planners are actually being phased out, and it's more going to be sort of a digital platform, I think, for communication. But effectively they are the same thing, but as you get older, it's more about the child taking responsibility as opposed to the parent writing things in the booklet.
Thank you very much for that, Annabelle. And I think just on the point you made about the digital platforms, sometimes it's a mix of both. So you have schools using the communication books and perhaps the student diaries, but also there's an online platform. And I think we can't emphasize enough the importance of just checking what's been recorded there. Because for younger children, for instance, it could be as detailed as having photos of what they've done during the day, interactions they've had with teachers, with peers. So it's just a good way of keeping track and seeing what's happening on a day-to-day, because during the parents' evenings, I mean, it's one evening in a term, it might not be enough time to go through everything. But as far as the teachers and schools are concerned, if the information has been put out there for you to see, then it's your responsibility to go look at it. So I think for all of us, this is a wake-up call as well as a reminder. If we're not sure, let's ask. Does the school have a digital platform? Are our children being recorded anywhere? Do we have access to that platform? And if we don't, how can we get access? Because we just need to know what's out there and make sure that the information is correct. But also, if it's something we need to be responding to make sure that we're responding in good time as well. So thank you very much for those. Now, I really like the idea about the flags as well. So who knows, maybe someone will pick that up and take to school to try and explore further what's feasible within their own school settings. Addie, when we first started, you mentioned, well, you alluded to this somehow, but I'll just ask it directly. Addie, and then everyone else, please feel free to chip in as well. What helps children to feel included when they experience difference? And this could be whether in the sense of special education needs, or in terms of cultural identity, or indeed social challenges, because there's some children who might have experienced difficulties making friends, forming relationships with teachers, adults, things like that. How can we ensure that children feel included, whether or not they feel different?
I think it's about letting them find or have someone that lets them know that they're okay as they are. I know it feels understated, but having a relationship with an adult that lets you know that you're important is really what they need in school and at home. I know I said before about being emotionally available, um, but it's about making sure that you're mirroring and showing your child what that looks like, about showing them how they can regulate after a bad day or how they can deal with a situation if it's been tricky. But still having those clear boundaries and without interrogating. Sometimes as parents, we do have that unfortunate, but who and when and why. We have to keep it kind of conversational, um, and calm, especially can be tricky, but when they have disclosed something really big, it's about keeping calm and remaining emotionally available without being controlling or overbearing.
Thank you so much, Annabelle.
Yeah, I think with regards to sort of, for example, SEND, I think very much so about having a person within the school that you can have that relationship with. But I think as a parent, it's important to really affirm those and that identity and strengths. So really talk positively about your children's differences as if they're strengths, and celebrate your child's culture and language and identity at home. Help children find role models who share their experiences. And I sort of said about arranging play dates or low pressure sort of social times is very important. And I think that almost coaching your children through those friendship challenges with empathy, as opposed, and sort of taking a step back. And I think partner with the school as well that your child goes to, share with them what helps your child feel safe and calm and confident, and work with the teachers around reasonable adjustments. So the schools have an obligation to make reasonable adjustments to support that child and their learning needs, and because that gives a message of reassurance. Really, you deserve to be included in the school. And I think when we were talking about schools earlier, I forgot to say is the website of a school is really important. It's like the shop window to what goes on in that school. You will find so much information out, but you'll also get a real sense of the school's ethos and values, and whether actually will my child feel a sense of belonging and SEND in their school. So the websites are vital for that. And I think as a school leader, when we're talking about belonging and SEND, it's making inclusion really visible and welcoming, using classroom materials that celebrate diverse cultures, families and abilities, celebrating awareness days. Are the schools celebrating neurodiversity, for example? What are they doing about anti-bullying? What are they doing about celebrating cultural festivals? And displaying those inclusive messages, everyone belongs here. And I think, you should sort of see those things will help that sense of belonging for those children. Definitely.
Thank you so much for that, Annabelle. Terence, would you like to add anything to this?
I guess just the only thing I'd probably add, because I think both Addie and Annabelle have shared extensively on what's useful. The only thing I'd probably add is just thinking about the emotional well-being of children and how them feeling included will impact on their emotional well-being. I think it goes back to what you're saying, Addie, about which is oftentimes a challenge, and we have to acknowledge this. Not everyone that's an adult and is a parent were once a child, and they may not have had the opportunity to have that nurturance of how to be emotionally, and I'm using this word intelligence there. It's just one of the things that it's called, emotional intelligence. So in terms of how to respond in a certain environment, may be tricky for adults. There are lots of adults who aren't even parents, and people well into their 60s, 70s, 80s who haven't really had a good idea of how to do emotions, and it may be almost like a foreign language to lots of us as adults. So it's that kind of thinking about what are the gaps that we may need to learn to say, okay, I may not know how to do this, but I'll get the help I need so that I can support my child or young person to be able to be emotionally available for them, because I think ultimately it's that emotional availability, as you mentioned, Edwina, that's really going to impact how that child is going to navigate any differences that they may feel. And it's how do we nurture that emotional intelligence even within our children, and creating that safe space where they can explore, they can grow, they can make mistakes, but also be able to feel safe enough that actually there's that element of co-regulation, and they've had enough mirroring and coaching to know actually I can manage this on my own. And that's ultimately the goal, so that they can be the next generation of adults who are emotionally intelligent, so that when they do have children, if they decide to, that we're creating, in essence, healthier children from an emotional perspective. So that may be the only other thing I'll add.
No, thank you very much for adding that point. And I think you just touched on something very important that we explore within the Africanus parent team as well, which is the fact that parenting is an intentional process, right? And a lot of the times, actually, all the time, we never get a manual for it. So it does take deliberate efforts to explore what parenting means for each of us, and to understand how we've been parented, what worked for us, what didn't work, but also explore the current situation we find ourselves in, understanding that our children are different from us, and perhaps the way we were parented may not necessarily work for the children now. It's a different context, it's a different time, it's a different everything, and even personality as well. And so that's why we have the purposeful parenting as one of the core modules that we deliver, as a way of saying, parents, we need to be intentional about this. We need to unlearn some things, relearn some things, and just be the best versions of ourselves to be able to empower our children and give them the best, in terms of that parenting process. So it's something you've touched on, and it's something I'll invite everyone who's here, if you haven't already, this webinar, for instance, is part of our offerings towards purposeful parenting, but we also have a dedicated program on that. And that's one of the areas that Adi is leading on as well, as a parent volunteer, because she's leading a community where we're providing constant support to parents depending on what the needs are, but just ensuring that we've got the right resources, we've got the right support system to navigate this parenting journey. And I think linked to the points that was made earlier about building healthy boundaries with children as part of that process of making them feel safe and making them feel a strong sense of belonging. We have a question from our audience, and thanks for those who've asked the question. How can you make children understand? Always try to push the healthy boundaries, because I think it's only natural that they'll try. So how do you make them understand perhaps why those boundaries are there, but in a way that is still positive and doesn't lead to any safeguarding consent, for instance?
I'd say it comes back to consistency. Ultimately, it's the consistency in those boundaries. By nature, a child is, it's not that, and I think sometimes it can be misconstrued as, and parents may think, oh, my child is just being bad behaved. But by nature, as a child develop, the world is going to be, this is new, I want to explore, I want to figure out why this is why it is, and what it isn't. So that's natural and that's normal. And I guess it's that bit of providing that consistent parenting of actually, this is, and obviously you can do it in a very helpful way, or you can do it a very unhelpful way. So I also advocate for the helpful way, and that is being consistent with actually, this is, for example, if we have a bedtime routine, it doesn't mean that we can't be flexible based on the circumstances, but we're consistent with the bedtime routine. And if we notice, there's, say, for example, any new skill that even as adults we're trying to learn, we need to go at it for 21 days. So if you think about New Year resolutions, and the reason why most people don't go to the gym and stick at the gym is because we're not able to do it for 21 days. So if we think of ourselves as adults, it's really hard to do something consistently for 21 days. But that's the only way we develop something new. So similarly, if we're setting a boundary, and I think sometimes this is the important bit that we need to differentiate. A boundary is, this is what I'm going to do if things aren't as we agreed it to be, not what the other person needs to do. So if parents can be consistent with the boundaries, well, this is what's going to happen, this is what I'm going to do as a parent, then that models to that child that actually, well, I know I felt like maybe I don't need to do that, but I'm seeing consistently that this is what my parents are doing. So I think over time that will then reinforce to that child, actually through modeling by the parent, through the consistency, that actually this is how we do boundaries, and that actually helps children by the time they become adults to be able to set healthy boundaries and not unfortunately become what most of us end up being, which is people pleasers.
No, thank you so much for that, Terence. And I think the point you made about the consistency, we cannot overemphasize. It's really key. But it's interesting, you also talked about flexibility. And for me, the bridge between that consistency and flexibility is communication. In a sense that if, let's say, bedtime is 8 p.m. and we've done that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and suddenly on Saturday we let the kids stay up until 9 p.m., I think it's about that, letting them know why Saturday is an exception, so that there's a clear understanding of the whys. And sometimes, even when we forget to say the why, the children ask why. And so I guess that sense of belonging and safety is also about explaining the why and not necessarily seeing it as a challenge on our authority as parents, but seeing it as part of letting them understand this is what this is about. It's about the boundaries. And as Terence says, you would also have to set your own boundaries, because they have to do that in school, wherever they go, they have to set boundaries. Who can speak to them? How can they be spoken to? How can they be approached? So those are boundaries they would have to set for themselves and they would have to navigate. But as parents, we have to give them the tools to come up with these things. And what's the best way to do it? Modeling, right? So thank you so much for highlighting those. I see a question here. I'll just throw it in because it's there and it's linked to this issue of boundaries as well before we move on to the next bit. And it is there any appropriate age to start setting boundaries? I think I can see the answers in your faces, but who wants to say something?
I was going to let someone else go first.
No, you go ahead, Terence. Roll. Go ahead. We'll let you go first.
I'd say they're always age appropriate boundaries. So it's just thinking about the age of the child, really. So there's no that you can only start setting boundaries at the age of 10. You need to set boundaries from a simple age as even if we think about a toddler or an infant who's now starting to crawl and may want to go move around and explore. And obviously children should be allowed to do dangerous things safely, but we still need to set boundaries around what they actually do. So even a baby that's crawling around that may want to crawl and go their own way, we can still set age appropriate boundaries for that baby that's crawling. So it really depends on what's the boundary that needs to be set, and it needs to be age appropriate. So those are the two things that I'd say. What it is, and is it age appropriate? And that's what needs to be considered.
Like, I think it'll change over time as your child grows, the boundaries and how you set them. So, like Terence said earlier, it's about being flexible and adjusting how you're communicating this new boundary and what it means and what this looks like. And as we've said, there's no handbook. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to go with the flow and adjust. I know, has anyone ever heard of the terrible twos? It's not actually a child being terrible at two. It's just a developmental stage where they figure out that they are independent to their parents and they can explore things. It's very similar as they get older and teenagers, they start to realize I'm my own person, I'm becoming someone. And it's the same. You have to set those same boundaries, but now you have to say, in this house we believe, in this family we do, and then go from there. But set the boundaries and let them know that there are consequences, even if it's not at home. This is why we have police officers, and there are consequences in life wherever you go. But these are what those consequences look like in our house. And if you were to do this outside, these is what those consequences look like there.
Thank you so much for that. And I think that leads us nicely to the aspects of listening and voice, because in a sense, this whole issue of navigating boundaries also reminds us of having a two-way. So it's a two-way thing at the very least. So it's the parents setting the boundaries, but also getting input from the children, all as a way of ensuring that the children understand what they are, why they're there, and really ultimately it's for their own safety and well-being. And so the question is, how do we create a space for children and young people to share how they really feel, whether it's about boundaries or about anything else? How do we ensure that they feel safe enough to speak out, voice their emotions, voice their experiences, especially because you've all said that that voice is an important aspect of belonging and safety?
I think the most important thing sometimes is to control your response and how you act. If you're a mum like me, it's control your face. I may not say it out loud, but my kids know what I'm thinking because it's there. So be mindful of those things. They've known you their whole lives. Every little twitch and every little thing you do, your child knows. They know what's going to upset you. They know what's going to tick you off. And it's about, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of something called active listening, but it's a really good thing to practice when they start small and when they go through that phase of why. Practice active listening, and it gets easier. Not really. When they become teenagers, sometimes it may not with some of the things they say, but it's about creating that space sometimes. And don't expect perfection from yourself or your child, because at the end of the day, you are just human. You might not be able to hold it in when they tell you something that is shocking, that as a parent you don't want to know or you weren't ready. But the best thing to do is be mindful of your, as Paddy said earlier, about relearning for ourselves about what we need to do differently so that our children can relax and come to us as they need to.
Thank you so much, Addie.
I think just sort of adding to that as well is not being afraid to say when you have been wrong and apologise for that. And because what you're doing is you're modelling that restoring, because you are going to get it wrong, and that what that does is it gives a message that it's okay to get things wrong because we can rebuild our relationship. And I think I would say that that's also a really important sort of aspect of it. And I think also just going back, and I know sort of said it right at the beginning about building that family, those family routines, and what does your family want to look like? Some family, what is it that what is our family? What makes our family special? And what do we do in our family? And in our family, everyone is valued, everybody is listened, and that can be very simply shown through, right, we're working out our dinner, and actually on one night a week the child is going to decide what we're going to eat for dinner, and it might be really something that you're like, oh, okay, I'm not sure, but straight away it's actually encouraging the voice and encouraging that belief that everybody is listened to and valued within the family. So there's sort of, I go back to those rituals, but they're quite important sort of emotional anchors for children as they sort of go through that sort of journey where there will be some challenges and there will be difficulties, and actually for them understanding as well that that's the natural course of life, and that there are going to be ups and downs and ebbs and flows, and actually labeling those emotions and helping them label their emotions and understanding how it feels, and then what can we do about those emotions. But I think definitely modelling an apology and being prepared to say, no, I'm sorry, I didn't do that right there, I didn't respond in the right way to you, and I completely hear what you're saying. I think that's important for them to understand that they can do that as well.
Thank you so much for that, Annabelle. Terence, yeah?
I think the thing I'd add is and it comes back to our own thinking from a parent's perspective. I think it's parents thinking about the approach and what's the outcome that they're wanting to have. I think if we were to just view it through those lenses, it shifts how we're going to approach it in the first place. So the reason why I say that is because if the approach is, I want my child to be healthy in all aspects, not just physically, but emotionally, then I need to be able to, like I've been mentioned before, model what that looks like. So if we think about it from the perspective of children are not going to only do what they're told, but they're going to do what they see more than anything else. So there's a lot of that non-verbal communication that Addie was mentioning about that may speak volume more than actually what you say. But if we're able to think about that and encourage, like Annabelle's mentioning around, actually, it's not just about rupture, because in life we will have rupture. All relationships are going to have rupture, but that's not the issue, really. Rupture is normal, it's the repair. So it's if there are lots of opportunities where that's been modeled for the child of, well, actually, things can be repaired in a healthy way, that is, then that allows them to navigate their peer relationships when they start nursery, when they get to primary school, when they get to secondary school. And then if we're thinking about, we're not just creating children for now, we're creating them that one day they'll be autonomous adults and we want them to be able to function like autonomous adults, then if that's the goal we have in mind, in essence, we're thinking about how can we set them up now when they're young for success when they're adults, and how we listen to them, how we encourage their voice to be valued within the home is going to impact the kind of adults that we want to see. So I think that shift in the frame of mind of, actually, I've created children, yes, they're lovely, playing with them as babies, but they're one day going to be adults. And what are the adults that we want them to be? If we have that in mind, it will help us to think about what is it that we need to model. If that means we're learning, unlearning things, then that's that intentional parenting that you mentioned about, Petty, or that's going to be quite useful.
No, thank you so much. And I think the only thing I'll add to this at this point is that in modeling the behavior, admitting our mistakes, apologizing, is not only to the children, but it's also in our interactions with anyone else, whether it's a colleague, a partner, a neighbor, whoever else. Because a lot of the times it's in those moments when we're not even speaking to the children, they pick up these things. They sort of know, oh, this person did this to you and this is how you reacted. And so if we want our children to be confident, we have to display confidence as well. And it's okay for them to see us cry, because it means they then know that they can cry. I think what's more important is how we deal with it. So yes, we cry, but then how do we deal with it? How do we pick ourselves up? How do we sort of fall but get up and take the next step? Because ultimately, it gives them, it almost permits them to say, well, I can do this as well. It's okay to cry because I've seen mom cry or dad cry or uncle cry or aunt cry. But actually, I also saw them get up from it. And that in itself could be a very strong message to them in terms of resilience, in terms of picking oneself up, when things go wrong. And if we've tried something that hasn't worked, we come home and we just say, actually, something didn't go right today. A, B, C, X, Y, Z. Again, giving them that permission to know that we haven't got it all. We also have downtimes, we also make mistakes, we also have failures, but this is how we navigate it. And we trust them enough to share our weaknesses with them so that they also feel like, well, if you could share with me, then okay, I'll share with you. I think it could be a it could be a very good way of also modeling, not only when it pertains to the children themselves, but also in other aspects of our lives as well. Now, we've spoken a lot about rupture, repair, and things like that. And I just want us to reflect on, as we're winding down this conversation, imagine that we've tried all we can, right? We've engaged with school, we've communicated, we've modeled, but there just doesn't seem to be something, or there's something that's just not fitting well, and the child still feels like they don't really belong here. How can we, as adults, help, whether it's our children or other children around us, rebuild a sense of belonging? And this could be, for instance, because there's been a conflict in the family, or there's been exclusion, or there's been some form of transition or separation. How do we, in such situations, help children, young people, teenagers rebuild a sense of belonging?
Say attending webinars like this is a good first place to start, for example, because it's getting the tools and the skills when things don't go well to be able to say, hey, one, I need help. So even as adults to say we need help to be able to support our children or young people, or children, young people that's in our care with the difficulties. And it'll be quite easy, but that's not the hand that some of us are dealt oftentimes, and life can be much more challenging than that. So it's being able to recognize, I think it's that recognition first, and that awareness first and foremost of, actually, maybe I need some additional help. And that may be from another parent, another professional, another community, another peer of that child, for example, someone that gets them, someone that they can relate to and feel safe with. And it's not a failure, because I think sometimes parents may feel like if they don't get their child, then they've failed as a parent. But that's not the case. It just means you may get your child in one way, and there may be another way that someone else may get them, and that's not an unhelpful thing. That just means you have another resource that you can lean on for support. So it's that awareness of actually asking for, well, one, that we need help, and then asking for the help, and knowing where to ask for the help may be the other bit that I'd say would be quite useful in that regard.
Thank you so much for that, Terence. Annabelle, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just thinking, again, in relation to schools, you mentioned, Paddy, exclusions and things from school. It is really important, if there has been a point where something has happened, that, really work with the school. The school should want to welcome back and create a sense of belonging for the child who has been excluded. Any exclusion, there should always be something called a reintegration meeting, and the focus of that is a positive reintegration back into the school community, and a commitment from the school of what they're going to do to support that child in doing that. And often there is then a commitment from what's the child going to do and what's the parent going to do to support them, almost like a contract, really. But there should always be reintegration, and I think that's really important. And schools getting that support from the schools as well, and finding, schools have pastoral teams, they do, and it's about finding, not being afraid to ask for that help as well if you need it from those professionals, because they can also then help signpost you as a parent to support the child in that sense as well.
Thank you so much, Annabelle. Adi, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I was just going to say to be mindful that sometimes those events can create an extra layer of anxiety, which can create a low sense of belonging, and then the child can potentially become hyper vigilant. So they're kind of constantly scanning for rejection or something else. So it might mean that the adults and the parents around them might need to be extra sensitive to those feelings. And sometimes we can be quite flippant with what we say, but in those moments we need to be extra sensitive and a little bit more cautious about what we're saying, how we're saying it. Kind of those early years practices that we were talking about earlier, the tone of your voice, what your face looks like, your body language, because the child may be internalizing stress and not telling you So just to be mindful that you have to take a little bit more of a, not necessarily a trauma-informed approach, but a little bit more of a sensitive, slow it down, and maybe let it be a little bit more child-led approach rather than um, being so directive.
Well, thank you so much. And I think I just see this even coming through in the way we discipline and correct, even at home. Because in a sense, all those incidents, especially if it's been a major blowout, the child has done something and been told of, it could almost be a mini conflict in itself or a mini tension in itself. And sometimes it's easy to just pretend it didn't happen and just carry on and expect the child to carry on as well. But I think from these discussions today, I would say this is also a reminder for us to actively try to reintegrate when such things happen at home, such that the child understands why they were corrected or why that was not the right thing to do or why they could have done differently. And also remember that that was done in love, as a way of just protecting them, keeping them safe. And altogether, it doesn't affect our value for them as children in the family. So reintegration that we've spoken about, I guess what I'm saying is in the school setting, it's very important, but we shouldn't lose sight of it, even in the home setting as well. Because every day there are lots of small things that happen which actually create opportunities for that reintegration, but also reinforcing our love for the children and the young people and just reassuring them that we've got them, we've got their backs and we're here for them, in looking out for their best interest, no matter what happens. Now, last set of questions looking ahead. I can't thank you enough, for all the insights you've shared, the experiences, and just, openly exploring those issues of belonging, whether from the perspective of schools, families, and various settings. And so I'd want to know from each of our panelists, if there was the one message, or one action, whether it's for parents, educators, anyone in the room, or anyone watching this, listening to this webinar, if there was one thing you would like them to take away to help the children and young people around them feel like, actually, this is my place, what would it be? Who shall I start with? Addie?
I knew I was going to get called. So I would actually like the one thing that the parents take away to be something that another parent has put in the chat about social media use. And we haven't addressed it. So I think very quickly, I want that to be the thing that we remember. Social media is another sense of belonging for the younger generation. And we didn't really address that today. I do apologize. It's only because the parents put it in there that I've remembered it. But remember to set rules collaboratively with your child. Look at things together, talk about it together. Again, modeling. If you're a parent that's always on your phone, your child's going to want to know why they can't always be on their phone. So model healthy use. Open dialogue about what you see online, what it looks like, online bullying, have those conversations. And I will get some information to you, Paddy, about online safety. But I think what I want parents to remember most is what you do is what your children take away. You could say almost anything, but from the moment they're born, everything they know how to do from talk, walk, sleep, eat is because they copied you. So that is what I want parents to remember, that their regulation and their self-worth, all of it comes back down to us as parents.
Thank you so much for that. And part of the reason I haven't mentioned the social media is because we're also having some programs coming up that will sort of address that. So I'll put out as part of the announcement. And when you do share the resources, we'll also add that to the parents resource page, which I'll also mention. But thanks so much for that, Addie. Terence?
I think good enough is a good thing that we need to think about, because I think as human beings, we aim for perfection and we're setting ourselves up to fail whenever we aim for perfection. So even as parents, it's to be a good enough parent. And that doesn't mean that you just let things go, but by being a good enough parent means that we recognize what the gaps that we may have. What are the things that we still need to learn? Because as human beings, we always need to learn something. and each child is going to be different. Their temperament is going to be different. So what worked for the first child may not work for the second child. So it's having that flexibility as well of actually recognizing, hey, I'm attuned to what my child's needs are and what they need to feel like they belong. And am I doing what's good enough or a good enough job of doing that? Because I think giving ourselves grace is very important. And the only way we can give ourselves grace is by realizing perfection isn't the goal, it's just to be good enough.
Thank you so much, Terence. Annabelle?
Yeah, I guess to go back to what I said earlier on about when children were asked about what does belonging look like in the family, slow down and see them, slow down and see us, and take that time to slow down and really validate that message that you're safe, you're important, and together we'll handle this together. But you're seen and you're heard and you're here, and I'm so grateful that you're part of my life. I think just giving that message and just saying it's great. Thank you for being part of our family. I think is a really important message to give.
Thank you so much for that, Annabelle. So I think if we don't remember anything else from this conversation, there's slow down and see us. There is good enough. And there is just mirroring the behavior you want in the children as well. I think there's been so much shared in today's conversation. I can't thank you enough, Annabelle, Adi, Terence, and all our parents, all our guests, everyone who's been part of the conversation. Thank you for participating so well. It's been about my place, helping children and young people feel they belong. And I'm hoping that as we leave today's conversation, we're leaving with something, at least one thing that we can commit to trying out to make a difference for the young people in our care, in our environment, such that they feel like they actually belong. Before you go, would like to hear from you. If you scan the QR code on the screen before you now, or you just go to the website, please take a survey. It's a very short one, and would like to know what you think about the webinar, which aspects you think we can explore further in upcoming programs. I didn't mention this, but it's also Safer Internet Day. And we've got lots of resources on keeping children safe online. So if you go to our parents resource page and you can see the QR code on the screen, there are lots of resources on keeping children safe online, digital safety, and would encourage you, they're all freely available. Would encourage you to just go online and just access the resources. And if you've got any resources which you think other parents could benefit from, please do share with us as well. We'll be more than happy to host those. We've got some upcoming programs which will be of immense benefit to children and young people around. So if you know anyone who could benefit from this, your children, your friends' children, the neighbors, anyone in your community, do signpost them. On Saturday, a few days from now, on the 14th of February, we're having a Teen Headspace Hangout. Essentially, it's a space for teenagers, children, and young people to explore in more depth issues around mental health and well-being, how to understand their emotions, how to understand their inner voice. And these are things that children already have to grapple with. So there are lots of stress they experience, whether it's from school, it's from social media, it's from pressures around them. There's so many things in the environment that are a source of stress to children these days. And sometimes it could be overwhelming for them to have these conversations at home. Sometimes perhaps they're not even sure they're allowed to have those conversations. And so in the spirit of building a sense of belonging, creating a conducive environment for children to feel safe, heard, seen, we're inviting you to also bring them along to this event on Saturday. It's holding in Leeds to take part in this conversation. And it will be led by our own Dr. Terence Isaacs. Please do register and get the children involved in this. We also have another session on the 20th February, so during the half-term week, and this one's about digital skills. And this is what I was referring to, Adi, when I was saying that we have an upcoming session. So in addition to staying safe online, we have Connor coming in, who works with Quickline Communications, and he will be addressing issues around just digital skills, not only from the perspective of safety online, but also how to empower the young people, because these days everything is online, whether you're looking for a job or whether it's even doing assignments, further studies, it's all online. So children and young people need to be very comfortable going online and using it in a safe way to make themselves better, improve their skills. So we're going to cover things like cyberbullying and phishing, fake news and AI, which is a big issue in today's world, how to share information online in a way that is safe and without compromising the privacy and safety of yourself, but also your family members, the importance of screen time and how to use it in a guided, disciplined way, which links to the question that one of the parents asked during today's meeting, and also digital jobs of the future, the kinds of things that they can already start exploring in terms of career pathways for making themselves more relevant in a digital world. So this is happening on the 20th of February. Please, the QR code is there. Feel free to scan and share with anyone in your circles or networks that could benefit from this. We have a session coming up on the 23rd of February, and that links to another aspect of the work that we do as a parent team, which is around neurodiversity. Specifically, this session is inviting anyone who's interested in the connections between faith and neurodiversity and inclusion. And what we're trying to do with this is to engage with faith leaders, church workers, youth leaders, and also the neurodiversity experts as well, to start to build a resource base that allows the faith-based organizations to actually respond positively to the needs of neurodivergent children. And so we're going to be working on training resources. We're going to also create a system where everyone who gets involved, every faith leader who gets involved, every organization that gets involved also receives the support that we're able to provide in terms of training and capacity building and first response to the needs of their community. So this is happening on the 23rd of February. If you know any pastors, faith leaders, church workers, children or youth leaders who could benefit from this, do share the word with them. It's a virtual meeting, and so you can join from anywhere at all. On the 22nd of February, we're going to the Al Huda Mosque in Bradford, and this is a session on safeguarding. One of the things we do in AfriKindness is to ensure that our trainings, whether it's safeguarding, mental health, neurodiversity, actually speaks to the values and cultural perspectives of the communities that we're working with. And so that's why, for instance, the previous slide, I showed you the focus group on faith and neurodiversity. And this one is a training being delivered in the mosque that really speaks to the issue of safeguarding from the perspective of not just the regulations and the rules, but also links towards the faith-based values as well, and how everyone can work together to make the mosques, but also the wider communities safer for children and young people. So if you know anyone who lives in Bradford or around Bradford and is a Muslim parent or a Muslim faith leader and would be interested in this, please do feel free to share with them. The QR code on the screen allows them to register, and you can also get more details through our Eventbrite as well. There's more coming. We've got another session, which is really a monthly drop-in. And this one specifically is a parenting support group for neurodivergent families. And so if you know any families who could benefit from this, let them know. Essentially, what they'll be receiving is basic training on how to navigate the process, how to support their children and young people, how to engage with schools and professional services, but also sharing experiences from peers. Because one of the things we've come to realize is for parents, sometimes it's just easier learning from other people's experiences, parents who have been in similar situations or who are navigating similar journeys as yourselves. So if you know anyone who could benefit from this, please do share the word with them. The first thing to do would be to send an email, because it's a closed group, to ensure the privacy and safety of the parents in the group. So it will be to send an email to the email address showing on the screen, which is jessica.sota@afrikindness.org. And once the parent sends in the email, they will then receive further information on how to join the group and be part of the monthly conversation. So the first one has already held, but we have more coming up in the future months. So do let us know if you are interested in this and get involved as well. And now to Addis. Addis running, like I mentioned previously, a support group for parents. And this group is a wider group for parents who are just navigating the journey. And the idea again is to provide peer support, to build connections, build a community. I saw in the chat group lots of people saying it takes a village. It does take a village. And so here's our own village for parents, and we're inviting everyone to get involved. It's an online group. And to join us, again, just send an email to adwina.smith@afrikindness.org, and you get all the information you need in terms of how to join. It's really for sharing resources, asking questions in a supportive environment. And one of the exciting things we're looking to do is also to read together. Some of us are readers, some are more listeners, but the idea is to get the readers to read the books, and then we have a chat, and the rest of us who are listeners get to learn about the resources that they've engaged with through reading. So it promises to be an exciting but also insightful and useful group to be part of. So please do join us. If you haven't done so already, please do follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and X or Twitter. We would like you to keep in touch with us. We've got lots of resources, as we've mentioned. We always post updates on our social media, so please do join us. And I think with that, we come to the end of it. All that's left is for me to say a big thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our participants. Thank you to everyone who's dropped a comment, who's used the Q&A. I can see the chat's been buzzing non-stop. And I'm really looking forward to going back and reading through all those messages. So thank you for your messages and for being part of this conversation. And I would also say thank you for the commitment you're making, because I trust that we're all making a commitment to be that source of belonging and safety for the children and young people around us, whether it's at home, at school, or wherever we may find ourselves. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening or day, wherever you may be. Thank you so much.